This weekend, I went to two anti-Israel events, and before I show you the footage of the second one, and I have the first one already online, before I do that, I want to discuss my thoughts and give some analysis to what I encountered when I was there. And the first point I want to discuss is who was there, who was the audience, and who were the organizers. Now, you would think that masks are something that people don't really tend to wear anymore. That whole situation is over. But this group had a lot of people wearing masks. It's going to be hard these days to find a group where people wear masks more than this group did. And that is essentially kind of like a left-wing thing these days. And that kind of fits into who these people were. There were a lot of hardline left-leaning type people, a lot of socialist types. And you know this because of the signs that they're holding and the organizations that these people were from. As far as the signs that they were holding, you will see in the video what they were. There were a couple of duplicates, people from the same sort of organization that are holding signs for their organization. And then as far as the speakers go and who they're a part of, whenever the main person that was the main speaker for the event were to introduce the next speaker, he would say their name, and then he would say who they were affiliated with, which organization they were affiliated with. And they tended to be with some obviously left-wing type faction. One of the speakers was from somewhere like Nurses for Socialism or something along those lines. And if that did not tell you that they were socialist or some sort of left wing, what they discussed really gave that off very, very, very much. They talked about how healthcare is racist, and that was echoed by the main speaker who spoke after them and talked along pretty much those same lines. And what they said is that healthcare as an institution is racist because black people tend to have worse health outcomes. And this is a left-wing ideal because of the way they sort of framed it. They said that the black people tend to have larger negative health disparities. They tend to have worse healthcare outcomes because of the healthcare institutions. They lack giving them the care. They essentially ignore them as the patient. And they said that as opposed to saying something like, oh, well, they could eat better. They could exercise more. They could take more responsibility, more personal responsibility over their own health. And the last point I would like to make here about the audience and the organizers and all these speakers was that I heard maybe 3 or 4 times them use the word comrades. If that is not a communistic left-wing word, I don't know what is. To stick to the language that they were using, I would like to point out a couple more examples. For example, they would say genocide, as in Israel is committing a genocide against the Palestinian people. They would call Israel or even the US an apartheid state. They were also imperialist, and they were also colonizers. So a lot of sort of Marx era sort of language regarding how countries operate and how they oppress people, how there are oppressors. There was also a large anti-Zionist sentiment among the speakers and even among the people in the crowd. Now, what does this mean? What is a Zionist? It's a word that gets thrown around, but I feel like it's controversial because people, 1, don't know what it means, and 2, people that are against it are really against it. Now, hopefully I do not simplify this too much, but in a simple sort of summary, a Zionist is a person, not even necessarily Jewish, but a person that believes that Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people. That is not to say that other people that are not Jewish cannot live in Israel, but it is just the home of Israel. Now, where I believe a big difference lies is that Jewish people allow anyone to live there. They just want to live there themselves. But the people that are anti-Israel tend to not want any Jewish people there at all. Now, maybe I can take that back because they had an anti-Zionist perspective. They want to rid the world of Zionism, which is not to say that they want to get rid of Zionist, which might be kind of tongue-in-cheek for saying Jewish people. So I mean, who's to say? I will get into some public polling numbers here, which can kind of help frame the situation, but it really does seem that they might be kind of walking the line of not being too controversial and saying things that are too radical. Now, speaking of radicalism, I do want to talk about something that I talked in a prior video, which was a video that was just like this, but of just my first time going to one of these protests. And what I've realized is that Hamas gets no discussion here, even though it's the big elephant in the room. Now, I guess I could say it got limited discussion because one person spoke about it, but it was in a sort of whataboutism sort of way. It was one of the female speakers that spoke in the event that I'm about to show you the footage from, and it was essentially, she said how you should respond to people who ask you to condemn Hamas, where she did not actually condemn Hamas herself. And what she said is that when people ask you to condemn Hamas, what you should do is go, oh, what about Israel? What about Israel's actions doing X, Y, and Z? How about Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people? And with that, she did not say, okay, well, Hamas is doing bad things themselves. I'm just going to essentially not discuss that and only talk about what Israel is doing bad. She could easily condemn Hamas and say that they've done some horrific things, but maybe she is kind of being elusive to those points because she supports Hamas. I'm not going to directly say that. I don't know. She did not say. I did not ask her. But, I mean, as I'll show you quickly here in just a moment about the public polling, maybe she does. And just one more thing here before I get into the public polling, I want to talk about their public relations, their PR. After the whole protest was over and everyone kind of dispersed, went about their own lives, I went up to the main speaker and asked him for an interview, just a one-on-one thing. I told him I'm just trying to get different perspectives. I like to come to these events and get sort of one-on-one sort of discussion going to get a bigger picture of what everyone believes from different perspectives. And what he told me is that he cannot do that because I first have to go to their PR person and organize it through her. I tried to coax him. I tried to convince him into just having a quick conversation, just me and him, it's just trying to get opinions here. But he was not interested. It was a very polite conversation. He did not have any sort of suspicion I was trying to attack him because I really wasn't. I just really went to get their opinions out there. But yet, to my dismay, he directed me over to them, and that was that. What is interesting is that the same thing happened to me the first time I tried to talk to the main speaker, the first time I was at these protests, which was a different speaker at the time. At that point, they told me they had to vet me first, which is interesting because it kind of makes you wonder, are they just trying to vet you to make sure that you are on their side because they don't want you to corner them? They don't want you to expose them for maybe supporting Hamas. Time will tell. That is my intuition. That's my gut feeling, but I'm not going to draw conclusions here, but that's just what it seems. Lastly here, before I show you the footage, I would like to go over some public polling information. After the event, I went home and did some research to kind of figure out what do these people tend to believe. What is the overarching sort of perspective? What is the overarching worldview? And what I discovered through 3 different public pollings is very startling. And it kind of makes you wonder if they're really walking the line and not saying the extra crazy stuff when they're in public. And they're just kind of trying to bring everyone in to be on their side so they can just be against Israel. The first public polling is from Pew, and they did a poll on American Muslims. And what they found was that 20% of American Muslims support Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel. They also found that 37% hold a favorable opinion on Hamas. The second public polling was from the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, and their polling was on Palestinian residents. So the first one on American Muslims, and on this one, it was on Palestinian residents. They found that about 70% of Palestinians support Hamas's decision to launch the October 7th attack on Israel. And lastly here, the third public polling was also on Palestinian residents, and it was from the Arab World for Research and Development. Their findings showed that 75% of Palestinians support Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, and 76% have a positive view of Hamas. If you were to compare these three different pollings, you would find that American Muslims tend to not favor Hamas or the October 7th attack as much as people actually living in Palestine. But either way, there are still a lot of people who support those things. And from a pro-Israel or even a moderate American perspective or moderate anywhere perspective from anybody, those are really strong numbers. All three of these pollings are very recent. They're all within the past handful of months. So it really goes to show what people believe today, not what they believed many, many years ago or back during the 60 War or what have you. It's what people tend to believe now from these demographics. The first one was the Pew. They're American. They are an American institution. And the other two were Middle Eastern. They were Palestinian, or at the very least, Arabian. So with all that, that is my analysis. That is my insight. That is my input. That is some of the research that has been done. Hopefully that sets the framework for the videos that I am about to show you. Now, let's get to the actual footage. Thank you for watching. This is the Agency of Influence. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment.
That separates them from the rest of their homeland. And again, the Zionist regime retaliated by brutally murdering 230 Palestinians and injuring over 36,000. After a peaceful action. Now, since October 7th, over 32,000 Palestinians, a large number of them children and women, have been murdered. And now all our eyes are on Rafah, a tiny area where 1.5 million people are crammed up, and where famine looms right now. And if the Zionist entity invades Rafah, the scale of deaths and destruction will be unimaginably worse. So we got a big task at hand. We gotta keep staying on the streets. Israel, that fascist entity, is using mass starvation as a weapon of war. They're not that genocidal intent to deny the people of Palestine food, medicine, anything that sustains life was actually openly stated by the Israeli so-called defense minister as early as October. 700,000 Palestinians are on the brink of dying of hunger as we speak. Shame. 8 trucks, food are lined up along the border, but the fascist Zionist regime refuses to allow them in. And stunts like Genocide Joe's, that floating pier, is just a way for the US regime to pretend to be the firefighter while they are the arsonists. Shame! The whole world knows that Biden and the US regime are equally responsible as the Israeli entity for the genocide that they are committing in Palestine.
That's right.
As if this is not enough, the US continues to give Israel almost $4 billion in aid from our tax money every year so that they can buy more weapons. In fact, right now, Biden is working with the politicians in the Congress to get even more, $14 billion in additional funding for the Israeli war machine. The Zionist regime, since October 7th, has dropped more than 70,000 tons of explosives on Gaza. For those tons, it's a metric thing. It's 150 million pounds of bombs that's been dropped on Gaza. Just that act itself
Genocide Joe
is a genocide by itself. Just that act itself. Dropping 150 million pounds of bombs in an area that's smaller than the size of Pittsburgh is a genocide. You don't need anything else. Now meanwhile, while billions of dollars are flowing into that criminal entity, the workers in this country are in crisis. We could use the money not only to build what the US empire destroys around the world, but also to build our public schools here, to give us public health care, education. Of course, there is no money for that, but there is always infinite money when it comes to genocide and the wars for the empire. Sisters, brothers, this is really a critical moment for both the Middle East, the region, and our solidarity movement. It is more urgent than ever that we continue to stay in the streets, keep the energy up in solidarity with the people of Palestine, that we stay laser focused on Palestine and continue expanding this movement, demanding a permanent ceasefire, an end to the siege on Gaza, and a free Palestine that we want to see in our lifetime. Free Palestine! The people in Palestine are united. Their resistance is united. And we need to stay united here as well. Because of the determination of the people of Palestine and the strength of the international solidarity movement, which we all are a part of, the Biden regime is under so much pressure right now that there seems to be a growing divide between the regime in the US and the Israeli regime. The decision, this recent decision by the US to abstain and allow a resolution for a ceasefire to pass at the UN Security Council, and the statements by the US officials opposing an invasion of an outright invasion of Rafah shows this. So what we're doing is making a difference, a big difference, and we need to keep doing it. We need to escalate it. This is a victory. This is a victory for the movement, and does demonstrate how instrumental that pressure is. But yet, Biden, despite the coming elections, is doubling down on the genocide and not doing one thing that could end this genocide right now, which is to cut all aid, military economic aid to Israel, which is a paper tiger which will fall within weeks once the U.S. stops funding it. We've been out on the streets for 6 months. You may feel burnt out, you may feel low energy. One thing I can guarantee you, for Palestine, we will always have that extra midnight oil to burn. When there's a genocide, we're gonna stand on it. If we could raise the level of our struggle to the 1,000 of the steadfastness and the sacrifice the people in Palestine are doing, we're doing an infinitely big thing. And we have to do that. Yeah. Until there's a permanent ceasefire, until all the displaced people of Palestine return back to their land, and until Israel does not exist, ceases to exist. Thank you.
And I'm going to echo again a little bit of what Typhoon just said, because I really am so proud of each and every one of you, because we have been out here for 6 months, but we have been out here for 6 months while the corporate media, while our ruling class has attempted to confuse us, to destabilize the movement, to split us up, to make us think that somehow, because I'm trans, that I should be against Palestinians. That's crazy, that's insane. At every single level, they're trying to make it so that you don't come out here today. So take that flame burning inside you, that passion for Palestine, that passion to see people to live free and to determine their own lives, to live in peace, and spread it to other people. Don't be afraid. The polls literally say that the majority of people are on our side. which means that the next time that we have a rally, let's try to get more people out here. And if you saw one of the flyers for the action yesterday, or this action today, or any other action, you know, somebody put that up, and that somebody could be you. And the more people we reach, because we also know with social media, right, we get siloed into these little things, right? They try to split us up in that way too, where if you like one kind of content, you're not going to see some other kind of content. So we cannot trust the ruling class, we cannot trust their institutions to make this revolution, to stop this genocide for us, right? We need to do it ourselves, and that takes all of us, every single one of us here today. Our next speaker is going to be a local member of the Palestinian community, Kareem Al-Sharafa. Everybody give him a big round of applause.
Assalamu alaikum. To all my brothers and sisters, peace be upon you all. I want to thank you for being here today. Today marks multiple days in history as well as religious significance. Many of my Christian brothers and sisters are celebrating Lent, the end of Lent, and now Easter, this Easter weekend. As Muslims, we're also celebrating Ramadan and fasting for Ramadan. The fast continues also for many of us, and it makes us think about what it is that we're sacrificing. All I'm sacrificing as a Muslim is a little bit of food and water for a few hours of the day. Yet I complain. I complain that I am hungry. I complain that I am thirsty. I complain that I am tired. Okay, should I speak closer? Okay, sorry guys, I'm not used to megaphones. So as I complain about fasting, I look at images and have discussions with family back home in Palestine. And I talk to my guys and cousins, aunts and uncles, and they haven't had food for days. They don't have clean drinking water, and they have to drink dirty water, and they get sick for drinking that water. Children are suffering because they're going to their parents telling them, I'm so hungry, and having to tie rocks onto their stomachs and tape it around their stomachs and push onto their stomachs so they can pretend like there's something filling their stomach. I don't want to share numbers with you today because as of my fellow speakers here, Hannah and Typhoon, said so eloquently with the numbers. Our brains as humanitarians, as humans, cannot fathom these numbers. When we're talking about over 13,000 children dying, it makes it seem like a number. Let me put that into perspective. The average school size is about 420 children. 420 children live or go to school in one school. If we bomb and destroy 30 schools and kill all the children that are in it, now will we begin to fathom what atrocities are taking place in Palestine, in Gaza today. We have an uprising here as Americans. Whenever we hear of a shooting in a school where 10 children have died and another 20 were injured. 13,000 children. Over 33 to 34,000 people dead in Gaza. my own flesh and blood. And then they try to mask it, saying that they are fighting terrorism. I'm going to put that into perspective as well. My father lived through 1948. He was born in 1941. There was a rude awakening that took place while he was living in Beersheba. It's known as Beer Seba. His neighbors got bombed. His friends right next door got bombed and they died in 1948. And then his grandfather came rushing into the house, told him, grab only the essentials with you and get out. We'll come back later to our homes. And that never happened for my family. They were forcibly displaced, and they had two options: either stay and die or run for your life. Because now we are taking over this land. We now want this land, and we will forcibly take it from you, which is an international war crime. All in the name of now calling it fighting terrorism. They ended up bombing Beersheba so bad that it's unrecognizable today. We took my father back after 70 years to Beersheba in 2019, and what they saw was unrecognizable. Trying not only to take the land, but to erase all memory of who used to live there before. Erase all the culture of what used to be there before. Guess what they're doing to Gaza today? In the name of fighting terrorism, we will not only go after the terrorists. No. We are going to carpet bomb every single building and flatten the land so we can start over and call it our own.
Shame on them.
Shame. These hidden agendas we've lived through for too long. My family has lived it for 75 years. We will no longer stay quiet. I remember as a child being embarrassed to go out there and tell people I'm Muslim or Palestinian, because I would be immediately labeled as a terrorist supporter. I know other children that are out there today with the way the mainstream media is painting everybody that supports Palestine as a terrorist, or anybody that supports Palestine as a supporter of terrorism. Shame on them!
Shame!
How dare they lie to us, to our face, all for political interest. Land Day marks the resistance of Palestinians for too many decades, fighting for their right, for survival, fighting for their right to live on their own land, fighting for their right for even peaceful protests. Land Day was the largest organized protest in Palestinian history. In 1976, they said, we're going to try to get a couple of million people together, march on the streets peacefully. And they criticized us. Why are we resisting? Why would we fight back? When you're being attacked, you have the right to be fighting back. You have the right to resist.
That's right.
And when we did that peacefully, how did they respond? With violence. Who's the violent one?
Israel.
Who's the one doing the killing?
Israel.
Who's the one doing the apartheid?
Israel.
Who's the one committing genocide?
Israel.
How dare they? How dare they?
Shame.
I can no longer sit here in front of you today and say we're going to stop. We got to hide. There's no way. Everybody needs to know the truth and the story of what's going on. And everybody needs to speak up, because political interests have now led us to this. Have led us to an open genocide, telling everybody to hide their humanity, put it in a closet, because we need that piece of land for somebody else.
No.
Shame. I thank you here for the opportunity today. As you can tell, this is very difficult for me. But each one of you that stands or even says one word for humanity has incredible courage and is doing a great service to the people of Palestine. To our own brothers and sisters that we feel their pain. They have muted their voices, and we are now responsible to echo their voices in every part of the land all across the world. And you are now doing your part. I thank you and I love you all for what you're doing. I will end with a peaceful call. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you.
Thank you to Kareem for sharing his experience. It's difficult, but we cannot harden our hearts, or close our ears, or close our eyes. When people are occupied, resistance is justified.
Resistance is justified.
When people are occupied,
When people are occupied,
resistance is justified.
resistance is justified.
When people are occupied,
When people are occupied,
resistance is justified.
resistance is justified.
Our next speaker is going to be Father Paul Abernathy from Friends of Sabeel North America. He's a member of FOSNA Pittsburgh and also on the board of FOSNA National.
There are some things that have to be said. Israel is a racist, apartheid, terrorist state. There are some things that have to be said. The beast of racism and genocide was not born on October 7th, but born long ago and always alive in the soul of America. There are some things that have to be said. This day we hear not only the screams of persecuted and dying Palestinians, but the screams of the Lakota and the Arapaho, the screams of our ancestors brought by chains in the Middle Passage here long ago, those who have been subjugated by violence, political and personal. We hear their screams all in the heart of the conflict in Palestine. There are some things that have to be said. There is an illness in the soul of America that must be eradicated. There are some things that have to be said. I will tell you, for those who are committing the crimes of genocide, those Zionists whose hearts are hardened, who propagate hatred and violence, it is time to lay your rifles down and leave these occupied lands. I will tell you, among us there are Zionists who live, who promote and support this violence. They are our neighbors. I say to you this day, we hear your violence, we see your actions, but not only us, you are seen by God. It is in the narrative of my own family history. Those slavers long ago who went to their deaths haunted by the brutality of their life, begging for forgiveness for their slaves. I will tell these Zionists who are committing these atrocities, there will be a day on your deathbed when you are closing your eyes and breathing your last breath, where you will hear the cries of the millions of Palestinians you seek to slaughter. You will see the rivers of blood that you have created. You cannot ignore, you will not be able to ignore, nor erase the memory of the atrocities you have committed. They will grip you in the hour of your death. It is important to understand that we must demand not only liberation for those who are experiencing these atrocities, but also proclaim the profound truth that those who are committing these atrocities need also liberated. We will never know freedom nor peace as long as this wickedness is alive in the soul of our nation. I stand before you as an inheritor of a great legacy of peace. For those who live in our African American community, we know well what it is to face these kinds of atrocities on a daily basis, but we know even better what it is to survive and thrive and be resilient in the face of them. We know that even in the face of such hatred, we have proclaimed ourselves agents of love. In the face of division, we have sowed the seeds of unity. In the face of despair, we have preached and sang about only hope. And I will tell you, those hymns that preserved our families for generations are in our hearts here still today. I stand before you as a priest of the Most High God, preaching in confidence that there is no victory against the spirit of love and reconciliation. There is no victory against the profound and unconditional and otherworldly love. There is no victory for those who are on the side of humanity and all that is good with us. And so we stand in this profound truth. We will never cower in the face of darkness, but seek always to promote true light, justice for all human beings, proclaiming their dignity. And I can taste the day that Palestine will truly be free. It will not only be a victory for Palestinians, it will be a victory for all humanity. I can taste and see the day in which Palestine is free, and Jews and Christian and Muslim come together and celebrate this with one voice. I can taste and see the day in which Palestine will be free, and that freedom in Palestine will ring here in the halls of our government, where even our politicians and our military and our police force and our civil authorities will be moved by this freedom to become agents of their own freedom here on our shores. I can taste the day when Palestine will be free, and we will know freedom in the depths of our hearts, a freedom from our own hatred, a freedom from our own judgments, a freedom from our own slavery to our own wickedness. I can taste and see this freedom, and I stand in the anticipation of this reality. Let us remain committed, remembering our brothers and sisters in Palestine who are dying here today, for their death will not be in vain. And in their sacrifice, I tell you, truth, freedom, justice, peace, and love will be sealed for us all.
From the river to the sea,
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea,
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
No justice,
No peace.
no justice,
No peace.
no justice,
No peace.
no justice.
No peace.
What do we want? Ceasefire. There you go. What do we want?
Ceasefire.
When do we want?
Now.
What do we want?
Ceasefire.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Ceasefire.
When do we want it?
Now.
If we don't get it,
Shut it down.
if we don't get it,
Shut it down.
if we don't get it,
Shut it down.
woo! All right, everybody. Our next speaker is named Dalel. They are a member of the Syrian community. Please give them a big round of applause.
Can you hear me okay? Thank you, every single one of you, for coming out. It's cold. It was raining today. There was another protest earlier. People still went to that. It's everybody's just cold and wet and tired. But we all know that this is nothing compared to what everyone else has done. Thank you, Tafet, for asking me to speak, and for everyone who's spoken, and especially for Father Paul, who gave us a spiritual perspective, which we don't always incorporate, and we need to incorporate because that day will come. He's absolutely right. That day will come. Whether we want to believe that or not, it's coming. So my name is Dalal Khalil. I am a co-owner of Khalil's Restaurant, and we are Syrian American Christian. And we have been fighting for Palestine for decades, long before any of this happened. And I want to say something also that's an observation too. Not an observation, it's very clear. You know, back in the day, which means any time before October 7th, you couldn't utter the word Palestine. You just couldn't. And now, look at us. We're in the middle of the street in the University of Pittsburgh. We're downtown. We're all over. That's rubbish. You can never say the word Palestine or Israel or anything. Now, let me be very clear. There's nothing of what I'm going to say right now that is anti-Semitic. And we all know that by now. And there are real anti-Semites in the world, but we are not them. And they know that, and we know that. Right? That's right. So let's get that out of the way right now. If anybody says to you that you're an anti-Semite or who accuses you of that, you respond, no, I'm an anti-genocide. I guess your pro-Zionist stance makes you pro-genocide. We are not anti-Semitic. And I would like to take this time to say a special thank you for all the Jewish people who are consistently standing up for Palestinian rights. It is not easy. It is not easy to make the change from the right. But you are standing up for, and have been for so long. And you know that God has written in your hearts right from wrong, and you use your voice for the right. So we're very, very grateful for you. And those who are defending this genocide are panicking because their lives are being burnt to the ground in the face of truth, and they can't win anymore. And the whole world is turned against them, and they know it, and we know it. We just have to keep fighting. This evil did not start on October 7th. October 7th happened because of this evil. That's why it happened. All they could say is Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. That's all, because that's all they have. I wrote this because I talk a lot. So when they ask you, do you condemn Hamas? Tell them, before I answer you, you answer me this. Do you condemn the 32,000 mostly women and children that Israel slaughtered and buried alive under buildings? When they ask you, you ask them first. Do you condemn Israel for shooting unarmed Palestinians, waving flags and bulldozing their bodies in the sand and garbage to cover up their war crimes? You ask them that. Do they condemn that? Before I answer your condemnation, do you condemn the 80,000 Palestinians dismembered and 18,000 orphans that you created? Do you condemn the 154 journalists murdered, not including their families? Do you condemn the extermination of Palestinians, the war crimes, blatant disregard of international law, by the way, that Israel has enjoyed from the UN and enjoy their protection since the world rescued them from the Nazi Germany's extermination? Do you condemn Israel for open season of mass slaughtering of Palestinians, stealing their land, imprisoning their children with no charges over the past 75 years? Do you condemn that what Israel is doing is the same thing that the Nazis did to the Jewish people?
That's right.
That's the victims and the murderers themselves. And then you tell them, when you condemn these blatant atrocities, then you will be allowed to ask me if I condemn Hamas. Also, when you speak to the defenders of this genocide, remind them, and this is important, especially you young people, of Sabra and Shatila in 1982. Because a lot of people don't even know this. They say Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. So you put them in their place and you tell them about Sabra and Shatila. They demand condemnation for October 7th. But where is their condemnation for Sabra and Shatila in 1982? You young people, listen up and Google it and find out the facts. Where for 3 straight days, And 3 straight nights, 3,500 Palestinian women, children, men were massacred by Ariel Sharon. 42 years before Hamas existed. The IDF led this operation, and they shielded and they covered, they protected, and they blocked the whole refugee camps in South Lebanon. And they wouldn't let anybody go in and let anybody go out, and they slaughtered them with the so-called Christian fallage. We protested that massacre. Me and my brother protested. My mother took us down. She risked her business. 1982. She risked her business. She went to Market Square, and we held signs just like you are about stop giving Israel money. That was in 1982. How come you weren't even born yet? And we're still doing this today. And then my mother and my father cooked food from the restaurant, packed it in the van, got all the cousins together, took them to Mansour Medical Center in Jeanette, PA, in Irwin. It's no longer there. But she took us up to the Mansour Medical Center to visit the children that survived that massacre. And I was 15 years old at that time. And that was in 1982, and there was no Hamas. So they were doing this long before, but nobody talks about it. And now you're all going to talk about it. Sovereign Shatila, shut them down. Sovereign Shatila, shut them down. Because what they're trying to say is that it started October 7th. It didn't start October 7th. We know that. And as I said this before, you don't kill 70% of women and children in a war because your soldiers can't target well. You kill them when you want to prevent the next generation from existing.
That's right.
They know exactly what they're doing. The plan has always been to exterminate. So why do you think that they're working so hard? Biden? People are defending Biden. They think, oh, he's the good guy. No, he's not the good guy.
He's not.
He's not. Why do you think that they're working so hard to level in Gaza? Trump's son-in-law, Jared, already has plans for a massive waterfront property. And don't kid yourself, Biden does too. He just doesn't say the quiet part out loud. And don't kid yourself, both Israel and the United States wants a regional war for oil, money, and power. And they are salivating for it. Israel keeps bombing Syria and Lebanon. Let me ask you, does Syria and Lebanon have the right to defend themselves? What happens when Syria has to bomb Israel? What happens then? It has been 9/11, 24/7 for 6 months. And Biden and the U.S. just approved billions in more weapons to bomb more Palestinians. Yay! Israel demands mercy from the world, but does not give it. They're routinely bombing Syria and Lebanon because they can't get enough. Father Paul was just talking about that day that will come when we have our last breath and we will face God. Whether you're a believer or not, we will face God and give an account of our life. And those people who are monsters right now, who have lost their soul, who are monsters, who bulldozes, who shoots and bulldozes bodies, who looks and bombs children and their faces are burned and their bodies are burned and they're orphaned and they're still doing it gleefully, cruelly and gleefully. Their day will come. But until that day comes, we have to continue to fight and fight hard. We're going to do a fundraiser at the restaurant. It's tentatively April 21. It may change until we can till later dates so that we can get more organized and have a larger group. So I hope you all come to that, and God bless you for what you're doing. This is not easy. It's a long 6 months. It's nothing compared what they're doing, what they're dealing with. But your voices, there's so many people. 6 months later, everybody knows. Everybody knows. 6 months later, they still are quiet. So, all right. So we have to shout louder for them. And one day, Palestine will be free. God bless.
Wow. out from this rally today with the kind of confidence and self-respect that Dalal just showed us. We cannot hide ourselves. We have to fight. We literally have no other choice. All right. Our next speaker is going to be Tracy Freeman from Healthcare Workers for Palestine. This is a very important connection to the struggle. Big round of applause for Tracy, everybody.
All right, can everyone hear me? All right, cool. Quick plug. Cleels has great food too, so that fundraiser is gonna be good. So I speak on behalf of Pittsburgh Healthcare Workers for Palestine. We want to point out that it's been over 5 months and Israel is still bombing hospitals. Yay! Hospitals! These are supposed to be the safest places in the world, and they're not just bombing them, they're storming them, destroying any aid supplies left, kidnapping medics, executing physicians, displacing families, and physically, psychologically, and sexually abusing Palestinians, seeking shelter and medical care. In the West Bank, the IOF commits murderous executions that have left bullet holes in the pillows of hospital beds. This is the work of the occupation. How can we let it go unanswered? Make no mistake, we will still treat anyone who walks through our doors. We don't celebrate suffering or make TikToks committing war crimes. But for the Zionists, remember that at some point, we can't save you. There is nothing we can do to fix what can only be described as a rotted soul. And there are no medications strong enough to allow you to forget what you've done. Yes. In Palestine and across the globe, people revolve their lives around keeping their children safe. Meanwhile, the occupation soldiers aim for their necks. The women of Gaza are targeted by Israel's mass murder campaign alongside their children. They have no clean water, no insulin, no menstrual hygiene products, and 50,000 are starving while pregnant. Shame. The men of Gaza are somehow being called terrorists, all while spending their mornings pulling bodies out of rubble and afternoons caring for the orphans and nights facing massacre to supply their communities with single bags of flour. Shame. The queer people of Gaza are told the West is their savior, all while bombs are dropped on their heads by the only democracy in the Middle East. Shame. American doctors who have returned from Gaza have all said the same thing, that the reality of what's happening on the ground is 1,000 times worse than anything we've seen in videos. They say the whole world needs to stop. So thank you to everyone coming out on these rainy days and continuing to resist. Of course, we're all going to be told this doesn't do anything. What better way is there to stop a revolution? Yeah. But we all feel the world shifting, and we see the cracks in the empire growing. This is the result of incessant local actions, of us showing up every weekend and shutting it down. We as healthcare workers demand an immediate, permanent ceasefire to end the carnage and facilitate the entry of aid. We call for the complete institutional divestment from all entities supporting the occupation. We demand an arms embargo with no further funding to Israel. We demand the return of the hundreds of kidnapped healthcare workers. And we demand an end to the occupation itself, because there is no such thing as health without liberation. And until Palestine gets that liberation, Shut it down!
Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! I want to highlight a specific part of kind of what Tracy said, or how Tracy's moving through the world. Because Tracy is saying that they're a healthcare worker, right? And I think a lot of us here today are workers, right? We spend probably at least 8 hours of our day in some workplace somewhere where we're making money for somebody else, right? Now, we also probably, a lot of us have coworkers, right? And if we're spending 8 hours a day with these people, then we need to be talking to them too, right? We need to be forming unions and worker power so that we can fight back against these kinds of things. Because this genocide has been going on for decades, and we know that there's other violence and other genocides out there that our government's supporting, right? Other places where people cannot live free, where people are dominated by this empire that's located here. So what better way can we fight for ourselves and fight for all of humanity than to build that kind of power, and to build the kind of power that can actually shut things down, that can have strikes, that can occupy workplaces, all of those things that are going to be necessary for our liberation and the liberation of Palestine and the liberation of all humanity. The other thing that I want to highlight, because again, to be an actually anti-war movement, we have to combat racism, because it is one of the most common ideological justifications for empire. Now, we live in Allegheny County, or probably most of us do, and I don't know if you know this, but it's a fact. Allegheny County has one of the worst maternal health care rates for black women specifically. Shame, exactly. And this is in a city dominated by UPMC, the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, and the Allegheny Health Network. So, shame. So, if this is one of the places in the country with the largest concentrations of resources spent for healthcare, then we should be questioning why this does not actually produce good outcomes for the people receiving that healthcare. And the answer for that is that the people who make those decisions about what healthcare looks like, about who has access to an education, about even something as simple as how many doctors there will be trained in the country each year, they have different interests than us. That they don't care if it's racist and it exploits people and people feel dehumanized when they go to hospitals, because the point of healthcare to them is not to help people or to save them. It's to make money. And the only way we are going to get our needs met in to stop this country from going all around the world and bombing other people and making sure that they can't live their lives is if we respect ourselves enough to fight for ourselves and to fight for other people. Our next speaker is going to be Dan Kovalik from the Pittsburgh Anti-Imperialist League. Everybody, please give Dan a warm welcome.
Good afternoon. I'll be brief since you've been here a long time. I taught actually international human rights law at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, Malacca Way, for 12 years. And honestly, I don't know how I teach the course now. I mean, really, the U.S. and Israel have made it clear that there's no law that applies to them, right? The International Court of Justice has now twice ordered provisional measures for Israel to stop killing Palestinians, stop maiming them, make sure they have food and water. And yet, Israel hasn't abided by this, neither has the U.S. What did the U.S. do in response? It cut off aid to UNRWA, the UN agency in charge of providing humanitarian aid to 6 million Palestinians throughout the Middle East. And now you saw Congress just pass a law, and Biden just signed it into law, forbidding the U.S. from giving any aid to UNRWA till 2025. Meanwhile, it is true, as Typhoon said, that the United States at least abstained to the ceasefire resolution at the Security Council of the United Nations, after vetoing, I think, 3 others. But then the U.S. announced on the same day it was a non-binding resolution. There's no such thing as a non-binding Security Council resolution. It's the only kind of binding resolution.
That's right.
Lies.
And now we've heard in the last 48 hours, Joe Biden is going to send more 2,000-pound bombs to Israel. A military expert from the Defense Department gave an interview to the New York Times saying the U.S. wouldn't use 500-pound bombs in a theater like Gaza, and we're sending them 2,000-pound bombs. So, I guess that's all to say that while Biden is under a lot of pressure, we need to keep up that pressure. We need to actually intensify it, because he seems not moved enough. And this war, as our sister said, from Syria is spreading fast to Lebanon and Syria. Aleppo's been attacked in the last few days. Damascus is attacked every other day, it seems. And the attacks on Lebanon are increasing. So there's a regional war coming. And we need to be out here to oppose that too. So thank you very much. Keep on keeping on, is Jesse Jackson.
Thank you.
From the belly of the beast.
From the belly of the beast.
Hands off the Middle East.
Hands off the Middle East.
From the belly of the beast.
From the belly of the beast.
Hands off the Middle East.
Hands off the Middle East.
From the belly of the beast.
From the belly of the beast.
Hands off the Middle East.
Hands off the Middle East.
No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
Not another nickel, not another dime.
Not another nickel, not another dime.
No more money for Israel's crimes.
No more money for Israel's crimes.
Not another penny, not another dollar.
Not another penny, not another dollar.
No more money for Israel's slaughter.
No more money for Israel's slaughter.
Our next speaker is going to be Macy from the Carnegie Mellon College Progressives. Everybody give them a warm round of applause.
Alright, so before I get started, I do just want to say it's great to see everyone out here, and I know it's hard. It's hard to see these images online and on social media, and it hurts. It hurts to see these images, and it feels terrible. But I want to remind us all that it's not a bad thing. Seeing these images and being moved by them, seeing these videos, shows that we have empathy. And that's something that not everyone has. Our empathy is a blessing to us, and we need to remember that. And we need to continue to channel it into our action.
That's right.
Now, this first part of my speech was just said by our last speaker, but it might be a little bit redundant, but I'm still going to say it. And so, as I'm sure many of you know, on Monday, the UN finally passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. Yet on Tuesday, the death toll in Gaza continued to rise, because unsurprisingly, Israel refused to comply, instead continuing their violent genocide. Israel's reasoning? Because Palestinian groups have, quote, delusional demands. And these demands were an end to the war and the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces. The bare minimum. And don't be fooled. The U.S. will try to seem as if they have no part in this genocide, that they mourn the deaths of the innocent. But they are not just complacent in this unimaginable violence, they are complicit in it. When the U.S. has blocked past resolutions, they are complicit in the genocide. When the U.S. abstained recently, they are complicit in this genocide. And when the U.S. argued that this resolution is non-binding in defense of Israel's continued genocide, they were actively encouraging and supporting it. And every single time the U.S. has sent funds to Israel, has sent weapons to Israel using our taxes, they were a direct contributor in this genocide. Despite 67% of Americans supporting this permanent ceasefire, the U.S. continues to actively fight against one. But this does not mean our voices have not been heard. We see that this pressure is working. We're watching in real time the U.S. crumble and attempt to distance themselves from Israel and the genocide. We're watching the U.S. become less firm in their explicit support for Israel, and our calls for a ceasefire are working. But we cannot end there. We're here today not just to show solidarity and support for the people in Gaza, but also to commemorate Land Day and those who have stood against the illegal occupation of Palestine. We're here because we believe in the justice and the liberation of the Palestinian people, and a ceasefire is only the start to that. That's right. Israel claims that they refuse to comply with the ceasefire because Palestinians want the withdrawal of the Israeli military from their own backyards, from their own land. Because these people want to exist without their oppressors sitting armed in their very yards, Israel will not withdraw. A ceasefire will not be the end to this violence because this violence did not start on October 7th. The fight to liberate Palestine goes beyond Gaza. It goes beyond Israel and beyond the Middle East. We must fight to stop the active genocide occurring at this moment. But we also have to fight to destroy the system that allowed this to occur in the first place. Yes. We must fight against the settler colonialism supported by Western imperialist forces that originally established the apartheid state and has continued to support it. We must fight against the system that has used our labor, our taxes, to continually perpetuate this colonial violence. I, like many others here, have had my labor exploited by the Western imperialists since I was 14 to fund Israel and the many other apartheid states' violence. This is the system that we must fight to destroy even after a ceasefire. Because if we do not, then the violence will never end. I, as a college student, want to focus especially on how this imperialist mindset has invaded and infected our universities. Academic institutions that are supposed to be the center of progress and intellectual curiosity have become the breeding grounds for the weapons used to kill Palestinians. The research and work of my fellow students at Carnegie Mellon is being used without their consent and without their knowledge for the benefit of the DoD and the IDF. Shame. Our intellectual drive and our ambitions are being exploited to further the Western imperialist powers. And yet when we question it, we're told that this is how it is. We're told to accept it if we want to do research, and we're told that if we want to do research, it will most likely be funded by the DoD, and even if it's not, it will be sold without our consent to someone who will use it to exploit people all the same. Shame. The violence does not start when the bombs are dropped. It does not start when military personnel illegally occupy land. It starts here, in the West, in our very schools, in our very homes. It starts when we accept the rhetoric that the only way we can succeed is if we sell our souls to Lockheed Martin. As said by Fanon, the political philosopher whose works focused extensively on decolonization, the oppressed must liberate themselves and establish a new humanity where man is no longer the victim of his own alienation. If we do not destroy the root of this genocide, it will creep back in. The imperialist system is a weed that sprouts only violence against the oppressed. And if we do not kill it from its roots, it will always come back. And so I just ask all of you to continue to fight. fight for the rights of the Palestinians to their land, and fight against the system that took it from them to begin with. Do not allow the West to tell you that peace has been reached from a ceasefire. Do not allow the covers to be redrawn over the violence that is settler colonialism and imperialism. Fight for the freedom and liberation of others, and fight for your own freedom in this imperialist hellscape that is America. Because none of us are free until all of us are free.
And I'm very thankful for Macy pointing out that definitely one of the strategies of the empire right now is to attempt to divert and place blame on certain individuals, but not the system. Most specifically, they're attempting to say that, oh, this is Netanyahu. It's Netanyahu's war. It's Netanyahu's occupation. It's Netanyahu's genocide. But that's not true. Because this really was happening for decades before Netanyahu was even born. And it's the whole system, it's the whole ruling class that sees, again, Palestinians as people who are not human, who do not have rights, who do not deserve to be respected. And so, exactly as Macy said, when we are going out and we are talking to people, we'll make it clear that it's not Netanyahu. And it's not just Israel, it's Israel and the United States and all those imperialist powers, the West, Europe, whatever you want to define it as, that's supporting it. And as people that are living within those societies, we have the strongest obligation to be clear on this and to be clear that this violence will only stop when people like us have power and not people like Jared Kushner who see a genocide as a business opportunity. Our very last speaker for the event is going to be Han, speaking for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Please give Han a big round of applause.
Hello, my name is Han. I'm with the Party for Socialism and Liberation here in Pittsburgh, and I'm so grateful to be with you all on Land Day to continue to fight for a free Palestine within our lifetimes and a ceasefire now. I want to talk about the importance of continuing to build the movement and to avoid burnout. For some of us, this isn't the first time our eyes have been opened to the violent and harmful nature of U.S. imperialism for everybody on Earth. And for others it is. But for all of us, regardless of when we joined in this struggle, it can be exhausting when you feel like you're screaming at the top of your lungs to your representatives on a daily basis and they don't seem to care. They either double down or ignore us. They gaslight us into believing that a genocide isn't happening on our dollar. They weaponize sexual violence and other atrocity propaganda as if we cannot see the realities of genocide with our own eyes. When we're constantly fighting, constantly using our voices, and change isn't happening as fast as we want it, as fast as it should be, because don't get me wrong, this genocide should have stopped months ago, we risk burning out. And we cannot burn out. We do not have that luxury.
That's right.
When I feel burned out or exhausted, I think about how burnt out and exhausted the Palestinian people are in occupied Palestine, where we have the luxury to take a break from our phones and social media. The people on the ground experiencing this abhorrent violence cannot take a break. 2 million people are displaced in Gaza. Around 700,000 people are sick due to having to survive in the displacement. 8,000 people have viral hepatitis infections due to displacement. 60,000 pregnant women are at risk due to lack of health care. More than 8,000 children have lost at least one of their limbs. 10,000 cancer patients are in dire need of treatment. I can go on and on. You cannot simply unplug from a displacement or from horrific violence in many forms being thrust upon you by your oppressor. We owe it to the sick, the displaced, the martyred Palestinians, the Palestinian people in our community here to take care of ourselves so we don't burn out, to build a sustaining anti-imperialist movement, to continue advocating for a ceasefire and a free Palestine, regardless of what our county council members say. It doesn't matter if they voted against the ceasefire resolution, because we will continue to organize and advocate for one. We're not going to stop. For as long as Israel's genocide goes on, for as long as Israel occupies Palestine, we are not going to stop. I recently came across a video on Instagram by Greg J. Stoker, who is a U.S. military veteran who is now vocally anti-imperialist and very pro-Palestine. His video was exactly about what I'm referring to, conflict fatigue. Greg linked the fight for an end to Israel's genocide in Palestine to the fight to end the Vietnam War. That struggle was 10 years of massive protest, organizing, and educating. I know for some of us here, they have been fighting for a free Palestine for decades. It's more urgent when we're watching genocide day after day. Greg's point was that the fight against imperialism, the struggle we're in today, will not be over in a few days, weeks, or months, not even a few years. More experienced activists in our community know this way better than I do. This is the long haul. This is what the struggle is. And we're fighting against U.S. imperialism as a whole, which has been in power for so long. Intifada means shaking off in Arabic. Intifada is the shaking off of an oppressor, an uprising in the face of power. It is a call for resistance. Looking back in history, we root for the resistance. We root for those who are oppressed. And that's happening in real time, right now.
Right.
We have only one solution, and that is an Intifada revolution. We will not have a free Palestine without resistance. We will not have a ceasefire without resistance. That's also resistance here, right here in Pittsburgh. Since we're in it for the long haul, we need to continue our resistance, continue our boycotts and divestment, continue building the movement here, continue showing up and continuing to use our voices. Right here. We need to do what we can to resist our oppressive government to get this ceasefire to happen. And to be honest, most of the time, it ain't fun. It can be uncomfortable and it can be a lot of work. But there are people we have to fight for. It's our responsibility to fight from the belly of the beast.
That's right.
A few weeks ago, some of our comrades in Johnstown held a visual for Aaron Bushnell, the man who self-immolated in protest in front of the Israeli embassy in D.C. I wrote some words to say in Johnstown, but unfortunately we were unable to get there due to weather, so I'm going to read part of what I wrote here. So if you heard it already, you're going to hear it again. I often hear the string of words, "I don't owe anyone anything." And when I hear that, I ask, why not? Why don't we owe our neighbors anything? Why don't we owe it to each other to sacrifice for one another? Especially if that sacrifice can benefit others. If my neighbor is openly being beaten by a bully, do I not owe it to my neighbor to scream for help at least? Do I not owe it to my neighbor to get in between them and the bully to end my neighbor's suffering? Do I not owe my neighbor to stand up for them and to shove the bully back so the bully knocks it off?
Yes.
Why would I not help my neighbor if they needed help? Why do we not owe each other humanity or dignity? I say this all to say, we owe the Palestinian people the world. We owe them our resistance. We owe them our sacrifice, our time, our blood, our sweat, and tears. We owe it to them to work through the uncomfortable aspects of struggling. We owe it to them to continue the fight. We owe it to them to win. There are opportunities to continue to build the movement at home and nationally. On May 24th through the 26th, there's going to be a People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit, Michigan. This conference will bring together organizations and people in the movement for a free Palestine. This is also a way to keep the movement for the total liberation of Palestine and the fight against U.S. imperialism sustainable. We're in the struggle for the long term, and being able to discuss our experiences in this activism with others who are in the struggle is extremely valuable. What we've been doing is working. Our protests, actions, education events, our calls to our reps, our resistance to Israel's genocide is working. This is why the Biden administration has been changing its discourse on the genocide in Gaza, on the famine, and on the violence we can all see. So join us for the People's Conference for Palestine on May 24th through the 26th in Detroit if you can. We need to continue to put pressure on, and most importantly, we need to stay organized. The struggle continues and continues. All of us cannot normalize this. And at the same time, we need to make this sustainable. We need to take care of ourselves while resisting. We need to continue talking to our neighbors, our co-workers, our family, our friends, anyone who will listen to us about Palestine, about Israel's history of oppression and violence that did not start on October 7th, about the Palestinians' brave history of resistance. We must continue to talk about our support for the resistance. We must continue to work together, to work in new and creative ways, to continue growing support for a ceasefire and a free Palestine. Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Thank you.
Thank you, Han. That was our last speaker. I'm going to say a few more words and then we'll disperse for the day. So, as Comrade Han said, there is going to be a conference in Detroit, Michigan from the 24th through the 26th. It's called the People's Conference for Palestine. And as I think a lot of our speakers today said, we're reaching this moment in history where it's very clear that the way things have been going are not sustainable. That if we continue on this trajectory, that not only will the Palestinian people continue to suffer in oppression, in domination, and continue to experience this genocide, but also that this violence, these evils, will be spreading all throughout the world. Not as if they're not already there, but it can get worse. We are facing so many crises, and it's important that all of us progressive people, all of us thinking and looking at the world and saying, my God, this is terrible. Can't it be different? Can't we make something else? It's important that we get together and talk with one another. And not just within Pittsburgh, though that's very important, and not just within our own communities, but reaching out to other communities. And this conference will be one way to do it. So, if you're interested in that kind of thing, keep your eye out on social media for the People's Conference for Palestine, and please get involved, because you can contribute. Each one of you has something to add to the movement. It will not be until each one of us is in the movement and we add even more people and have all of those experiences together that we will win. The other thing I'm going to say is that one facet of this struggle for the liberation of Palestine right now is the electoral struggle. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this movement of uncommitted votes that those people registered underneath the Democratic Party and the system right now are placing on the ballot in the primary, uncommitted, to show Joe Biden that they're not going to vote for genocide. Now, one of those ways that we can prove that we're serious, that we actually are not just going to shut up and forget about this, that we can't be intimidated into supporting a genocide because the other guy is somehow a lesser or greater evil. Because remember, our two choices right now from the main parties are a guy who tried to overthrow the little democracy that we have in this country, and then somebody who's literally supporting a genocide. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to be voting for either one of them. So Summer Lee is a representative locally who actually has stood up for Palestine. The Party for Socialism and Liberation is running in the national election. We have our candidates are Claudia De La Cruz for president and Karina Garcia for vice president. Now, it's really difficult to get on the ballot. We need 5,000 signatures throughout Pennsylvania in order to do it, which really means that we need 10,000, because if the ruling class gets an opportunity to strike off votes and like signatures from the pages, they'll do it. So we need your help to get on the ballot. If you want to add your name to get Claudia and Karina on the ballot for the presidential election in 2024, to provide some sort of different option other than the two corporate ruling parties, to create at least one party in this country that is actually for the working class and actually for meeting the needs of the people, then we have the sign-up sheet right there. Please make a line. We also have some people walking around with clipboards, and you can talk to them too. But thank you so much for coming out here today, because as we've all been saying, we cannot be silent, that we cannot just allow ourselves to be intimidated and to be repressed and to not say anything and to not do anything. I hope that all of you go from this rally today, including me, and we go out and we do more for Palestine, and we take care of ourselves so we can take care of other people, and that we fight together. Thank you so much.